So who's going first today?
on me. Oh, Dina.
Dina.
Yeah. I'm gonna present should I present my screen?
Yeah, let me take mine off. Okay, you can present whenever you're ready.
Mm. Oh, so can you see it now?
I can see your screen.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. So I chose the Nova Scotia fishing dispute. I don't know if you've heard it in the news. Has anybody heard about it?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I heard about it.
Yeah, because like at first I wanted to talk about something else, but I found out that like this is not really talked about that much. Okay, so first I'm gonna talk about like the media bias in Canada. So I found that Canada's like 16 out of 180 in report. So basically Canada's pretty good. Like we don't have that much bias. We have a government funded broadcaster and mostly independent outlets, which are all regulated by the CRTC. So here it says Section 3 of the Canadian Broadcasting Act says that media organizations should reflect equal rights to linguistic duality and multicultural and multiracial nature society. Um, Canada is immediately moderated by the government, and since a lot of our organizations are um, owned by corporates, it has some pro corporate bias. So these are some headlines from the news, of different sources that talk about the fisherman dispute. So for some context, we're going to be talking about the Sibeginogibic First Nations, which are the second largest Mi'kmaq community in Nova Scotia. So there was a ruling exactly 21 years ago that affirmed a treaty right to hunt, fish, and gather in pursuit of a moderate livelihood, which affected a lot of communities in lots of provinces. And there have been some initiatives to enforce this treaty, but the real problem is that the moderate livelihood was never defined, and like that's the current issue right now. So what's happening right now is that the First Nations decided to celebrate the anniversary of this, and they launched their own moderate livelihood fishery outside of lobster fishing seasons, and 200 people gathered to support this decision, and they held a ceremony to bless it, and they gave their own licenses and tags. Mm. So mm, yeah, and then there are tensions between the indigenous and commercial fishermen in the area. They accuse First Nations of illegal commercial fishing, but because it's out of season, but the treaty says moderate livelihood, so that's like an issue. And they asked because tensions got really high, and they asked Prime Minister to intervene. And currently, both sides are saying that they don't have a problem with each other, and the focus is on the Minister of Department of Fisheries and Ocean (DFO) because she's refused to do any action to help de-escalate the tension. Yeah. So the commercial fisher stance is that they're worried about conservation and future generations because they're fishing out of season. They think there should be law that applies to everyone. their representatives, they said that they don't have a problem with indigenous people fishing, but that they think that they're using this as like to commercially fish. So again, the problem is that everybody thinks moderate livelihood means different things, and there is not really a regulation on this. And they wanted to do a meeting, but the Sipeknagadic chief said he's not interested because they have their own battle with the government, which is completely separate from the commercial fishers. So each side currently their battle is with the DFO. So this is Colin Sproul of the Fishermen's Association, and then he argued that fishing license that the chiefs were giving is not based in Canadian law and is for them to sell the catch on the market, which they think is not allowed. And they think that that moderate livelihood only means food, ceremonial source fishing. And he quoted that in the absence of law and order, good people can be forced to take the law into their own hands. And the responsibility for that falls squarely on Minister Jordan and the predecessors who have not enforced the rules. The chief of the First Nations also said the same thing, and he said that the minister should do something about this. Yeah, and the fisheries minister warned that only commercial buyers are licensed to buy lobsters. So this is a quote from a Mi'kmaq journalist. He said, "We can't call it an illegal fishery because the problem is that the DFO has not implemented their own law on the treaty, and they haven't addressed the Marshall decision. Just because there are no rules to govern a moderate livelihood fishery, that's the DFO's problem, and that doesn't mean that what they're doing is illegal." But this is, in the eyes of DFO, it might be illegal, but in fact, the Mi'kmaq have a legal right, a constitutional right to go fishing. So this is the Sipeknagadic First Nation chief, Mike Sack, and he said, even though they have this law, it's been really hard for them to use it. It says exercising these rights continue to bring frustration, conflict, and hardship. They've had attempts to fix the issue before, but there's no mutual understanding of what moderate livelihood actually means. And the only thing the minister has said is that she's deeply concerned about the escalating tensions and everybody should go home. Because there are blockades happening and there were police stopping there. The commercial fishers, they were circulating the area that they were fishing, taking their lobster traps out. There were even flares that were shot at them. So I found some examples I thought were a little biased. Like this one, it said the summer season is closed to commercial fishing, but open to indigenous food, social and ceremonial fishery, which does not allow the catch to be sold. And then this part, it says the fishermen say thousands of kilograms of lobster are being landed every day by indigenous fishermen and resold, which is not. There's no fact to this. There's no the indigenous people have denied this, and it says no sales are allowed in an area when the commercial season is closed, but the Mi'kmaq people have their own rules, and they don't think the rules of the federal government really apply to them because they have their complete different set of rules. And I thought this one was a little better because it's first said both sides of the argument. It said the First Nations, where the sale of the catch is prohibited, is being used as a cloak for a large-scale commercial fishery. But the Mi'kmaq rejected that claim, and they argued their right to fish for a moderate livelihood was affirmed by the Supreme Court of Canada in 1999. So another thing I found biased was the headlines, the quotes, and pictures. Like when you search for them, the certain headlines that come up first, like the headlines that were about the flares and the arrests and the tensions were really the last things that came up. Like this one that said the Colin Sproul, he's in response to the flares and the threats to lives of indigenous people. He said, in the end, no life is worth all the lobsters, but still, the Assembly of Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq Chiefs, they declared a state of emergency on Friday because of the violence occurring over Mi'kmaq fisheries across the province. So, like, as I said, there's this article that says the Canadian police makes arrests, and they say it was because of assault, but they don't really said who was arrested, like which side. I just assumed it was the commercial fishers, but it didn't really specifically say. Also, another thing is that I didn't find the commercial fishers. They said that they're worried about conservation, but I didn't really find any articles that talked about the area of the land that the indigenous people are using to fish and how much they fish, and like does it really, like, are they fishing that much that it affects conservation or not. I didn't find anything that talked about this. However, I found some opinions. Okay. I found some opinions that there was this commercial fisherman. He was talking about it, and he said they tried to do a scientific research, and the indigenous chiefs agreed, but the DFO wasn't interested in funding that, and eventually it just died down, and like they weren't successful in doing that research that they wanted to do. Also, not all other biases is that they both sides, they said that we should watch our dialogue. Like, if we can't, like this is that it's not an illegal fishery, and the Mi'kmaq are not protesting, and because they're just celebrating, and it is their legal right. So we have to be careful of what we use. So commercial access in the end was never considered an implementation of the treaty, but the problem is that it's not really defined. In the end, the commercial lobster fishery of the Mi'kmaq First Nations make just under 4% of the 1 and 2 billion in total landed value for 2016. So here are some opinions from both sides. The Michael Sack, the Sipeknalkitik First Nation, said that we're here as a ceremony to exercise our treaty right, and we're not here to fight. And another person said that it shouldn't be an argument. They should be allowed to fish because it's their territory and their land. And 20 years ago, it was settled that they were allowed to fish. So the commercial fishermen, one of them said that it's not appropriate for anyone to fish in a lobster breeding ground during the molting season and destroy the resources for all the generations coming in the future. And another person that has been a fisherman for 18 years said, when you have two separate sets of rules, you create hate and you create division. And these are some sources. Like, some sources I found were a little biased was the Aboriginal Peoples News, which is for Aboriginal people, should obviously be there. I have some videos I found. I could show them to.
Yeah, show them.
Okay. Oh wait, the voice doesn't work. Does it? Huh. 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 Oh, what happened? Let me just. Okay. So I'm gonna share my other screen. I don't think it's gonna work here. So this is like a short video I found of a Mi'kmaq person talking about this.
We don't hear any sound.
Oh wait, you don't? Okay. I think if you present, you can hear the sound. Let me see if I can do it from my. Oh, I don't think I can do it. So basically, she was an indigenous woman that she was saying that it's our right and it's our treaty, and commercial fishermen are not letting them buy supplies, fuels, and gears, and then the people cannot pay their bills and you know live. So she thought it was racism. Anyways, that's like the whole story. The commercial fisherman says that it's not fair, and then there's the conservation issue, and then the indigenous people are saying it's our right and it's our land, and the treaty says that we can do this. But in the end, everybody is waiting for the ministry and the government to intervene and define, because it's not a real issue. It's been an underlying issue that's been happening, and until they define what moderate livelihood means, it's gonna continue to happen. So anyways, that was the whole story.
Okay, so what's your opinion?
My opinion is that I think it is their land. Like, there are treaties that, and they are using it, so they should, like, it's their land, so you know it's nobody else's business. But also there should be an investigation if they're the commercial fishermen are claiming they're they're fishing more than they can, and there should be some, like, the government needs to define what moderate livelihood means, and yeah.
And why now and
Basically,
not 1999?
because I don't know, the people were finally tired, and they said that what we're doing now, both sides said this, is if what we're doing now, the government should have done 20 years ago. And then they decided to, like, because of the 20th anniversary of that, they decided to finally launch and give their own licenses.
So
I
you
think
don't.
there should also be an investigation that if it is actually affecting the, conservation,
Do you
because there are
believe,
not that many people. I don't know, because there are only like 1,000 people, like Sipigate, I forgot that name, First Nations living there, that, and not all of them are fishermen either. And what I read, it said that they've only given 5 licenses with 50 traps each, and all of them are small, boats. And I'm not sure if they affect the environment that much as the commercial fishermen are claiming, but still, it should be, you know, investigated.
anyone else have anything? Questions?
No, it was really well done, Dina.
All right. Great. So that was the first one.
Wait, sir, do all of our presentations have to be that long?
No, but you know, if you're complete, Dina, and everyone else, go to like submit or whatever, so I can know that you completed it under the
Okay.
politics scrapbook ongoing thing.
Should I submit my presentation?
Yeah, sure, if you want.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so that being said, let's talk about the movie, The Autocrat System, which was the USSR. Obviously, it was a farce. Who didn't know that it was a farce?
You told us that it was.
Yeah, not at the beginning.
Sir, I read it in the thing description for Netflix. You know how it says like the genres. You know?
Yeah. What did it say in Netflix? That it was a comedy, a farce?
It's a dark comedy.
You know what? That being said, it's pretty real how things went down, and that's just you know, the USSR. But there are other countries in the world today that are basically like that. Can anybody name any potential countries that? Yeah.
Russia, like all of Russia, like some parts are not as bad, like communist wise, but like there are still like some parts of Russia that are pretty bad.
Well, explain, because Russia's a democracy with a president. This was in the before the democracy, right?
Okay, do you
Cuba is one of the communist states in the world.
Cuba?
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like the North Korea.
North Korea. Yeah, many people talk about North Korea as being like that, you know. But it doesn't have to be a communist country, right? Autocratic systems are systems regardless of what the official country's policy is, right? Where there's a group of people who basically control everything, decisions,
There-
etc.
I basically think Iran is autocratic.
Usually, you know, on paper, things are different than what people say they are in real life.
Yeah, because there is like a presidential election, but there's also a supreme leader at the top, which they don't choose themselves, like the people don't choose.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know how it's called a democracy if there's a supreme leader.
It's
Oh,
just kind of a symbolic democracy. The president doesn't really do anything.
Yeah.
The
I
supreme
know.
leader has all power essentially.
Like the
Same with
presidential election is all staged. Like they know who's gonna win. And everybody just drops out at the end.
Yeah. So what does this, you know, this kind of intro teach us about world politics? Has your view about anything changed at all, even in the last week of taking this class?
Yeah. So, sir, you know how like sometimes they were doing the right thing, like they wanted to free the people, but then other times they were just killing them, and I didn't understand that. Like, was it just to look good in front of other people?
Well, keeping up appearances is very important, right? You know, when Stalin dies and they're all like overacting, oh no, I'm so sad. Only when people were around, and then when there was no one around, what were they doing? They were trying to figure out how to get themselves more power, right?
Yeah. So it's
Um,
really scary because you don't know anybody's like actual intent. Like they don't have any beliefs. It's just they want
Exactly.
power.
Exactly. You can't, you know, in these types of countries, especially in the history, you didn't know who to trust, right? Even within that small circle, they ganged up on a couple of their own individuals, right? Made sure, and then when he died and they started killing all the people, even though the country stayed communist and Soviet, it was a new era. You know, out with the old, in with the new, even though it's all the same, right?
Also, I think adding on to what Dina said, everyone was terrified of Stalin. Like he kind of he
Oh, we had
was
a list.
he was a dictator.
Okay,
Everyone
we need our
hated
new list now. What
Like
do you think that
everyone
list
hated him.
was?
Yeah, everyone didn't like him, but they were kind of forced to like show loyalty because they were so scared. So that's kind of like what kind of hid their true intentions because no one was trying to die.
And we see that today. There's some pretty popular, famous pictures of, people hanging around or taking a photo opportunity with Kim Jong-un, and everyone's crying. You can Google it. And now if you look at their faces, are they crying? Why? What kind of tears are they? Are they scared? They're scared that they'll say the wrong thing, they'll look the wrong way, and everyone was scared for their lives. And people said in these communist times when the USSR existed that the walls have ears. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Right? You couldn't trust anybody, but you definitely couldn't walk into a room because they might have mic'd it and used it against you, right? So at the beginning, when they're talking, when they're at the concert, and they're like, "He has a perfect ear. He would 100% a perfect ear, a sharp ear," all that stuff. They don't have to be talking like that, but just in case, possibly there's a recording, So
Yeah. So
yeah.
before like 10th grade history, I didn't know like freedom of expression and protest was like a thing because it's not everywhere.
It's absolutely not everywhere, and even when it is legal and look what happens in the States. We have, especially in the last year or so, the couple years, the the growth of the far right and the far left. And look how they're treated by the establishment when protesting, right? People can, right-wing people can go to Capitol Hill with weapons in their hands, protesting, their gun rights, and nothing happens to them. And then left-wing people, protest the innocent killings of individuals, and they themselves get, hurt. So which one's allowed to, which one's not allowed to, that kind of stuff, right? It's a very interesting world in which we live in. So, learning about politics and the systems and how they work is very important because we can open our eyes to the veil that exists possibly between what you're told exists and what actually exists, right? So let's take a look at politics in the real world. I have posted some things here. Basically, a few individuals, especially these who have become, rather famous in their own right, or popular negatively or positively, regardless, but popular. People know who they are, and they're in the news often. And these are also politicians who began their careers early on, careers as politicians. Often we think about politicians as being somebody who was a lawyer for a while or a doctor or something, and then choosing to go into politics. And that exists often. But there are definitely some politicians who go into politics right away. Stephen Lecce, very famous one right now in the news constantly. Andrew Scheer, Mark Holland, Michael Sessions, and I've chosen to, post a couple of their Wikipedia pages there, kind of just highlighting that they've been in the field for a long time. Stephen Lecce is not an old guy; he's quite young. He was, he's born in 1986, and he began his career He was writing he was writing speeches for Stephen Harper, and rose up to become the Minister of Education that we see on the news, especially all summer, especially back in March, April, May, constantly. What's he going to say today? What's he going to say today? And divided, because there are a lot of people who definitely stand by him, and a lot of people who think that as Minister of Education, he doesn't really have the background. But as you guys remember in grade 10 grade 10 civics, in the cabinet, most people don't usually have any type of background in the department in which they are assigned. When I say most, that's definitely not always. The Minister of Defense in Canada right now, the Canadian one, is a veteran, a military veteran, and so forth. But sometimes it seems like ministers are chosen with no rhyme or reason to why they're going to be in this case, the education minister or the health minister or what have you. So a lot of people go into politics, and it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have to be elected and run for office and be elected, right? So here's a few, careers that are involved in the political, realm. Anyone going to political science in university next year?
Me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's your intention of with that degree?
I want to get into law, so I felt like having a political science degree would be really interesting and give me the logical reasoning to take my LSAT.
Okay, sure.
It's also interesting.
Sir,
Yeah.
me as well. I want to go into like criminal law.
Okay. So
Be a criminal lawyer.
law and politics, people think of them as being very similar, right? A lot of lawyers become politicians, right? That kind of thing. Of course, it makes sense because politics is law. But it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be a lawyer or trained as a lawyer to be in the world of politics, right? Poli-sci and law are two separate departments. And at St. Rob's, law is in the business department. Politics is in the Canadian World Studies department. But, like all degrees, all disciplines, they're all connected in many ways, right? So anyway, let's take a look at this document quickly. Examples of political careers. In the government, you can work for the government and not be somebody who is elected, like I said. What's public policy? Anybody who has a career in public policy, what could that possibly mean? What do you think public policy means?
So like anyone in public policies, don't they like develop programs for like the government's public goals? Could that include creating laws or bylaws?
Yeah. So yeah, law has something to do with it, right? Bylaws, people in the office of implementing, or like we saw the other day with the presentation on different enforcement agencies. Well, each one of those enforcement agencies has their policies, right? But it's not really all that it is, right? Sometimes, often the government has their political vision, if you will. And those that work in the realm of public policy implement their visions, right? How are we going to take this, these promises, if you will, and put them into place for everyday people, basically, right? So yeah, the bylaws is a part of it, but it's a pretty big thing. Public administration research. People who work in an office talking, You know, they deal with what people think and want to know what, you know, that's a very important job because, for instance, let's say something is illegal, yet as we progress through society and history, more and more people think that that particular aspect of our culture should be legal. You know, public administration research could be involved in showing the government that, you know what, a lot of people want this particular thing to be legalized. Our research shows maybe you should legalize it or propose that it be legal. Tell the people, and they might vote for you. That kind of thing, right? And there's a whole list. We won't go through them all, obviously. You know, if you take political science, often just like, I don't know, I can't remember who it was, Sarah, you know, you could go into law, not just for, you know, I mean, obviously law has many, many realms. You could be a real estate agent or law. You could be immigration law. There's a ton of things that law exists. You know, either are lawyers for the governments too, in the court systems, outside the court systems, private, et cetera, and political science is a great way to start that career. Politics, obviously, you know, lobbyists. We're going to talk about lobbyists as we go through. Does anybody know what a lobbyist is?
It's a group or an
Someone who
organization.
tried-
Sorry, Ryan, you can go.
No, you can go first.
It's a group or an organization that is attempting to sway government leaders for a particular cause or reasoning.
Okay, Ryan, what were you going to say?
Along the same lines, I was also going to add that they often use, like, they try to appeal to politicians either like financially or giving them some kind of support in a way to like bargain with them.
Okay, so, you know, some of these things are, you know, not necessarily legal, what you're talking about, like financial support has to be done very legally. Otherwise, it's known as what? Bribing. Basically, there are companies out there, and you know, it often is said that many governments really have no power. They're at the beck and call of these organizations, right? Again, just what people say. I'm not saying that. But for instance, you can, you know, as a investigator, you can figure out why is it that there are things like cigarettes that are legal and have been for years and years and years that, you know, health, you know, most doctors will agree that are not good for you. Yet it took so many decades for the government to legalize cannabis. And why, right? Did they really legalize cannabis because the people wanted it? Or did they know that it would become a multi-billion-dollar industry and certain companies pushed the government to legalize it? You know, these are questions that you need to ask yourself, right? And how you believe it works behind the curtain, because there's always a curtain, right? Or is there? I don't know. That's what people say. And so, have you ever seen a movie called Thank You for Smoking? Well, there's a movie called Thank You for Smoking. We're not going to watch the movie today. I don't think we'll ever watch it, but regardless, it's all about lobbyists. And in this case, it follows a cigarette lobbyist in the United States. And basically, you know, the inner workings, or at least the director and writer's view on the inner workings of how lobbyism works, lobbyists work, and change official policies through the law, right? So it's a very interesting system, and they do exist, and there are people who are lobbyists as their career. You know, journalism is a big one for poli-sci. You know, sometimes people want to become a journalist, and and then in grade 12 they're like, well, should I go to university for journalism, or should I go to university for poli-sci or history or what have you? Because in journalism school you'll learn how to write, research, this and that. But if you have a specific topic in which you want to research and discuss and write about, it's probably a better idea not to go to journalism school and go to the field in which you want to write about. That's not even my opinion. I remember in grade 12, one of my friends, he didn't know whether or not to go to history or journalism because he wanted to be a journalist. And he got accepted into both a history program and a journalism program. And to make the decision, he actually asked a number of journalists, people who are professional journalists. And they all said, don't go to school for journalism if you want to be a journalist. Go to school in the discipline that you want to write about, right? Poli-sci, this and that. There's you can work for nonprofit groups, et cetera, even business and industry, et cetera, all these. So this is basically a list. Now let's take a look at these questions here. What do you believe motivates an individual to become immersed in public life? So, we have public life and private life. Public life would be just that. Your what you do as a career. Journalists will write about. People will know what you're doing, what you're saying, etc. And then, of course, private life would be, a career that's not viewed by and vetted by the public eye. So obviously, some people, especially the people we're gonna, take a look at today in class, chose a life of public service or at least public life. Why would somebody want to do that?
Maybe they feel they have a good idea of how to be a leader and they want to affect change. So they use their platform publicly to do so.
Yeah. So they want to affect change. Did you keep saying something after affect change? I don't know if you did.
I said they could use their platform, like their public platform, to do so.
Are you still talking? Because I can't hear you. I see your thing is like jumping up and down, but.
Can you hear me now?
Okay. Anyone else? Does anybody in this class?
It keeps freezing. I don't know if that's on my end or yours.
No. What would make you maybe change your mind? Could there be circumstances where you might be compelled to become involved with political issues? In high school, it keeps freezing you, sir. Well, it kept freezing you too, sir, Sarah. Ugh. It's so late. Honestly, this afternoon class is tiring. But there are people who had normal, regular, everyday private sector jobs. Something happened to them or their family or even their country. And yeah.
Do you want like a specific example, or
I don't know, make one up. I mean, it could be something you know of, somebody who did become a politician or involved in political issues.
So like the leaders of the NDP, the founders of the NDP, because they wanted to unionize, I think, and the government didn't allow them, so they created the NDP to like support workers.
Is it just me? Uh-oh. Hello? Hello?
Hi.
Sir, you're echoing.
I think my computer. Hello? Hello.
Hello.
Sir, you're going.
I think my computer keeps freezing.
It's better now.
All right. Anyway, Ryan, you were saying I missed almost all of that. In fact, I missed all of that.
All right, like the leaders of the NDP, I believe they wanted to unionize, but they just wanted more worker rights, but the government didn't allow them to, so they founded the NDP in order to support workers.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
Another, sorry.
Talking. It's Sarah.
Pardon?
Sarah, you
Yeah.
keep talking and I keep missing it.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So another example could be Nelson Mandela when he was in South Africa under their apartheid. I don't think I'm saying that right. Apartheid government. And his works in trying to change that government and then eventually rising to political power and becoming president or
Sure. Yeah. It's a good example, right?
Sir, I also remember like there was a Congress nominee that she lost her kid because they didn't have health insurance or something, and then she decided to, run for the Congress.
Yeah. So there's stories like this all over the place, and these are people who saw injustice in one way or another and chose to become politicians. There are people who saw injustice and didn't choose to be politicians, but chose to, work in the field. Look at the Me to We or We, Craig Kielburger. Unfortunately, they just closed down. But if you guys remember the story, he was I can't remember what grade he was in. He was a young student, and I think he was in our board actually. He went to maybe Brother Andre or something, and he learned about child slavery in the world, and then did something about it, or wanted to create an organization that would help, eliminate child slavery or child working, if you will. Even in high school, people see something and join a club. I mean, obviously we have no clubs this year, but Ride for Life, we're doing something about something, it's all politics, right? So what do I have here? Uh-oh. Okay. I'm trying to figure out the order in which I posted these things. Here. Okay, why don't you guys take like 20 minutes to read this document? It's the one that says right here, Politics in the Real World. Actually, you know what? I want you to read all three of these. Do they show up on your screen as the same as mine? Wait. Uh-oh. Your screen is frozen. It is frozen. Let me try again. Present now. All day the internet here has been crap. Oh, maybe. No. I just joined. Okay, well, anyway, there's 3 handouts. They're all like a page long. They're called Politics in the Real World. There's actually 4, but that was the first one that I showed you. Can you still hear me? How about I just write it down so everyone can see? Hmm. All right. So give you some time to read 3 documents called, okay. All right. You got that one. Good. So it's 1:30. Let's check back at 2. I'm still here, but obviously it's cutting in and out.